The president, of course, is entitled to choose his team. That's partly what elections are about. The Attorney General, more than any other cabinet official, must be the people's lawyer, an advocate for the rule of law above all else. My office has received nearly 23,000 calls and emails opposing this nomination. Many of them I cannot read today on the floor for fear of violating the Senate rules. But it's clear from these comments that young Coloradans who came to the United States and know no other country but this country, who arrived here illegally but through no fault of their own, fear they will be deported back to a country they don't know. It's clear to me from the comments that I've received in these letters that Coloradans in the LGBTQ community fear that an Attorney General Sessions would turn a blind eye toward discrimination. It's clear from these comments, Mr. President, that Senator Sessions has not earned the confidence of many Coloradans who may soon rely on him to protect their rights and to identify abuses of constitutional power. And Coloradans, many of whom I know, who fought for equality and justice during the civil rights movement, fear that we will turn back much of the progress that we have made. We have a disagreement about Senator Sessions' role before he came to the Senate, but the fundamental reason I object to his nomination as Attorney General is that he led the fight in 2013 against our bipartisan effort to reform the broken immigration system in the United States. And I sat here on this Senate floor night after night after night, listening to the senator use fear and inaccuracies to derail our best chance in years to fix this broken immigration system. Now, in time, I've come to understand that people come to this floor and they're not always accurate in what they say. Sometimes they don't mean to be accurate. Sometimes they're just mistaken. That was the first time I had ever heard that kind of relentlessness, saying things that just weren't right. I'm being careful with my language. Because of last night's ruling. He claimed that our bill, which, and by the way, that bill, unlike almost anything that has happened in this place in the 8 years that I've been here, that bill started out as a bipartisan effort, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans working together for 7 or 8 months in a room trying to solve each other's issues. There's a lot about the Senate today that the American people should not and cannot be proud of. And I'll come to that in a minute. But the work of the Gang of Eight I would have been happy for people to have seen what happened behind closed doors in those 7 months. It's how the Senate ought to operate. It went to the Judiciary Committee, where Democrats and Republicans together amended the legislation. They made it better. And then it came to the floor of the Senate, and we had more amendments, and it passed with 68 votes. It still hasn't passed the House. It's never even gotten a vote on the House floor. Senator Sessions claimed during that debate that our bill would have, quote, dramatically increased incidents of criminal alien violence, officially legalizing dangerous offenders while handcuffing immigration officers from doing their jobs. He claimed it would have legalized, quote, thousands of dangerous criminals while making it more difficult for our officers to identify public safety and national security threats. Senator Sessions claimed our bill would lead, quote, to a huge increase in immigration, invite a flood of immigrants into our nation who would steal jobs from, quote, struggling American workers. These claims are demonstrably untrue. If our bill had become law, we would have secured our borders, we would have bolstered internal security, we would have better protected American workers and strengthened our economy. Contrary to his characterization of what was in that bill, the 2013 bill provided far greater security than President Trump's plan. The first two words in the title of that bill were border security. It's been completely ignored by the critics. It's been completely ignored by people who want to make an issue out of this in national campaigns. But the reality is, it provided billions of dollars toward new technologies to monitor the border. It called for the building of a 700-mile fence. And by the way, none of the rest of it would come to pass until we took care of the border. Nearly 20,000 new Border Patrol agents, 4 times more than ordered by President Trump and double the current number, and paid for not by raising taxes on the American people at our border with Mexico, not paid for in a way that would destroy our trading relationship with Mexico, but paid for by fees that people were paying as they were becoming lawful in the United States of America. It had protections in that bill for American workers to ensure that employers hired American labor first. I know he objected to this, and I understand we had a difference of opinion, but the bill included a tough but fair path to citizenship, requiring people to go through background checks as part of a long path to citizenship. During the presidential campaign, Senator Sessions advised now President Trump on immigration policy. In fact, my understanding is that the president's immigration executive orders, including the one that's being challenged in court, mirror Senator Sessions' positions. And these positions are antithetical to our history, to our values, to who we are as a country. Last Friday, Mr. President, the highlight of my year, I got on a plane and I left Washington. That was pretty good in and of itself, to go home to Colorado. And I went on Friday to Dunn Elementary School in Fort Collins, Colorado, where Kara Roth's 5th grade class welcomed 26 new Americans from 13 countries to the United States. It's an international baccalaureate program, this elementary school. And we were in the gymnasium. 5th graders were there. This is an annual event. The 5th graders were there singing. There was a young girl who had won an essay contest on what it meant to be in America. Kids came in wearing their Boy Scout uniforms to post the colors. They were the color guard, the American flag and the flag of Colorado. And no politician would have had to tell anybody in that room, oh, the 4th graders were there. The 4th graders were there watching what they would be doing next year as 5th graders. There was no need for a politician to tell anybody in that room that America is an exceptional country. No politician needed to say that to the 5th graders in Mrs. Roth's class who are studying the Constitution, studying immigration. And you certainly didn't need to tell that to the immigrants from all over the world. And by the way, they were from all over the world. I think I mentioned it. They were from 13 different countries. And one of the great parts of this whole ceremony was when they asked people to stand up from the country from which they came. The 5th graders also stood up if they were from that country. There were kids from China that were standing up. There were kids from Mexico standing up in this 5th grade class. Incredibly, 3 kids from Libya whose parents are at the university in some capacity in Fort Collins. As always in these naturalization ceremonies, people had tears in their eyes because, as one of them once said to me at another time in Colorado, that his dream had come true the minute he became a citizen of the United States because he knew that his children would be citizens of the United States of America. And everybody in that room knew that. I think what's important for us is that those kids, those fifth graders' perspective on American government and on democracy and on the history of this republic, their perspective, I think, probably may not be quite exactly right, because they, thank goodness, have been untarnished by special interests and untarnished by campaign money and partisan fighting and power struggles that have nothing to do with the American people or their priorities. But their view of what the essence of self-government is all about is really what it's all about. It's really what we are supposed to be doing here. A commitment to a Republican democracy, a commitment to the rule of law, a commitment to the separation of powers. The stuff they're reading in their little constitution, just like this one, is what this place is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be what we're doing here. And it's the reason why I'm objecting to this nomination. But more than that, I feel compelled to talk a little bit about President Trump's attacks on the judiciary and on the free press over the last several weeks since he's been sworn into office, since he's taken the oath of office to be President of the United States. He's repeatedly undermined the credibility of federal judges doing their constitutional duty to uphold the rule of law simply because he disagrees with them. The vice president said the other day, there's a tradition in America of one branch of government criticizing another branch of government. There is no tradition I'm aware of a president meddling in an ongoing case in an Article III court. Just today, he called our courts political. It's about the most damaging thing you could say about our independent judiciary. And he said that last night's federal appellate hearing was disgraceful. A decision hasn't even been rendered in the case. And he is saying it's disgraceful. Earlier this week, he accused what he called dishonest American journalists of, his word, ignoring terrorist attacks in the name of some unnamed hidden agenda. It's the Denver Post editorial, and I say to my colleagues who are here, I'm coming to the end, but I sat through the last speech at some length and want to make sure I get on the record. So please, through the chair, I beg the indulgence of my colleagues for a few more minutes. But as the Denver Post editorialized yesterday, quote, and by the way, stating the obvious horrible truth here, the Denver Post, in an editorial I'd like to submit for the record, Mr. President.
Without objection.
Thanks. They wrote yesterday, quote, American journalists have been killed reporting on terrorists. They have been beheaded. To suggest that some kind of shared bias exists throughout American newsrooms so strong that it compels journalists to hide truth and thereby endanger the public is as dangerous as it is demonstrably untrue. That's right. It is dangerous. It's dangerous for the leader of the free world to be saying that journalists are crooks, that the facts they're publishing in newspapers and online are untrue when they're true. It's dangerous when we are engaged in an experiment of self-government that goes back 230 years to the founding of this country to refute things that are absolutely true as false, and to claim that the reason they're being raised is because people lack integrity, that journalism's all about false news. The White House put out a list of, I think it was in the 70s, of terrorist attacks they claimed had never been reported. And newspaper after newspaper after newspaper had to run lists of the events that the White House described as unreported, and then had links to the stories in their own newspapers and other newspapers that had reported on terrorism. And as the Denver Post noted, and it is worth remembering this, there are journalists who have lost their lives trying to cover this story, to have us better understand what's happening in the Middle East, what the threat of terror looks like, and have been beheaded on television because they took that risk. With respect to the judges, for years it's been so painful around here to get anybody confirmed that I just see these folks who are lawyers who have to put their law practice on hold for something that should be the greatest reflection of achievement of their life, being appointed to a district court, a federal district court in this country, and who wait and wait and wait because of the unconscious or unconscionable delay and disputes and partisan bickering that happens here, instead of getting people on the court to do the job that they need to do. And now we're going to be in the business of accusing judges and the judiciary of being crooked, of not following the law, of just playing politics. And I think it's really important for us, not just Democrats, but also Republicans. And I know my colleague is here from Florida, and I want to say in this body how much I appreciated his comments last night. He may not appreciate that I'm saying that, but I appreciate his comments, because a lot of what he said I completely agree with. And I think in the end, while I know it's become fashionable to tear down rather than work to improve the democratic institutions that generations of Americans have built. By the way, this place didn't get here by accident. It's not a fluke. The founding fathers would be shocked to know this republic still exists. They'd be proud. I think they'd be proud of the progress that we've made, but they'd be shocked at the time that they were compromising, Mr. President, with one another, slave owners and abolitionists, compromising to create this republic that never had existed in an expanse as big as the 13 colonies geographically, or with as many people in the 13 colonies geographically. For them to see this 230 years later, from coast to coast, 330 million people, the strongest military on the planet, the strongest economy on the planet, a place where people want to come, just as my mother and her parents came, to build opportunity for the next generation. That's incredibly special in the history of humankind. And we need to treat it, as my colleague from Florida was saying last night, I think, with a little more care. I'm not just talking about the Senate. I'm talking about our responsibility to provide oversight for this administration. Talking about the importance for us to set an example for the children that I saw last Friday at the naturalization ceremony, just as they're setting an example for us. None of us is going to be here forever. And we have a lot of work to do. There are a lot of people here and around the world who are counting on us to pull ourselves together and start making this place work. And I'll just finish by saying that I think in this world of social media, it's also critically important for us to remember the importance of edited content and the work that journalists do. There's not a class of school kids that I don't impose at least that thought on. And they think about the research they're doing for their papers and the work that we need to do as senators. So I thank my colleagues for their indulgence. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this floor. It is a great privilege to be here, but it's a privilege we need to exercise in a way that actually reflects the values of this country and the expectations that the American people have for us to address their priorities. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.